Story number 1. Footprints in the snow. Winter in the Rocky Mountains is unforgiving. The biting cold, relentless snowstorms, and treacherous paths make it a place where only the brave or the foolish dare to venture. My name is Jack Mitchell, and I've always been drawn to the wild, to places where nature reigns supreme and civilization feels like a distant memory. So, when my friends Emily, Sarah, and Mike suggested a winter camping trip in Colorado's Rockies, I didn't hesitate to join them. Little did we know, the mountains had secrets far darker than we could have imagined. It was early December, and the first heavy snowfall had blanketed the landscape, transforming the rugged terrain into a pristine white wilderness. We arrived at the campsite just as the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink that quickly faded into the deep blue of twilight. The air was crisp, and the silence of the mountains was both eerie and serene. We set up our tents near a small clearing, the perfect spot to build a fire and share stories under the starlit sky. As night fell, we huddled around the crackling fire, the warmth a welcome respite from the freezing temperatures. Emily, the most adventurous of us, regaled us with tales of local legends, stories of mysterious creatures and unexplained phenomena that were said to roam these mountains during the long winter nights. Sarah, ever the skeptic, dismissed the stories with a laugh. "It's just folklore," she said, poking at the flames. "Nothing more than old wives' tales to scare tourists." Mike, the joker of the group, chimed in. "Yeah, unless you count bears and other wildlife as the stuff of legends." I listened, a chill creeping down my spine despite the fire's warmth. There was an undeniable sense of isolation here, a feeling that we were truly alone in the vast expanse of the Rockies. As the night grew colder, we retreated to our tents, seeking the comfort of our sleeping bags and the promise of a good night's rest. The next morning, the world was transformed by a fresh blanket of snow. The sun shone brightly, reflecting off the icy landscape and creating a dazzling display of light. We decided to explore a bit before setting out on our main hike, eager to soak in the beauty of the winter wilderness. As we trekked through the deep snow, the crunching underfoot the only sound breaking the stillness, Emily suddenly stopped. "Guys, look at this," she said, pointing to a series of large footprints embedded in the snow. They were unlike anything we'd seen before, massive, with deep impressions and an odd, elongated shape that suggested something far beyond human. I crouched down to examine them more closely. "What do you think made these?" Mike shrugged, his breath visible in the cold air. "No idea. Maybe a large animal?" Sarah rolled her eyes. "Probably just some bear or elk. Nothing to get worked up about." But there was something unsettling about the footprints. They seemed deliberate, as if someone, or something, had left them with purpose. The group exchanged uneasy glances before deciding to follow the trail, curiosity overcoming caution. We ventured deeper into the forest, the trees towering above us like silent sentinels guarding their secrets. The footprints led us along a narrow path, winding through dense thickets and over frozen streams. After what felt like an hour of walking, the trail abruptly ended. The footprints vanished without a trace, as if they had been erased by some unseen force. Confusion and unease settled over us. "Where did they go?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with apprehension. "I don't know," I replied, glancing around the snow-covered landscape. "But something doesn't feel right." Determined to make sense of what we'd seen, we decided to return to camp. As we walked back, the sky began to darken, the clouds gathering ominously overhead. The temperature dropped rapidly, the wind picking up and howling through the trees. We hurried along the path, the earlier excitement now replaced by a growing sense of dread. That night, as we sat around the fire once more, the atmosphere was tense. The earlier stories of legends and mysterious creatures seemed more real, more immediate. We tried to shake off our unease, but the feeling of being watched lingered. Around midnight, a sudden hush fell over the campsite. The fire flickered violently, casting dancing shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. I was the first to sense it, a presence, something unseen, lurking just beyond the edge of the light. My heart raced as I looked around, trying to locate the source of the sensation. Then, without warning, the silence was shattered by a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the forest. We jumped to our feet, eyes wide with fear, as the sound reverberated through the trees. The scream was followed by the sound of heavy breathing and the unmistakable crunch of footsteps in the snow. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, we saw a shadowy figure emerge from the darkness, moving towards us with an unnatural grace. It was a man, or something that looked like a man, tall and imposing, dressed in tattered clothing that seemed to merge with the shadows around him. His face was twisted into a grotesque grin, eyes glowing an eerie red that pierced through the darkness. "I told you," he growled, his voice deep and guttural. "You shouldn't have followed the footprints." Panic surged through us as we backed away from the figure, the fire flickering wildly in the face of the cold wind. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. The figure didn't respond with words. Instead, he raised his hands, and the temperature in the camp plummeted further, our breath visible in the frigid air. The shadows seemed to come alive, swirling around us like dark, malevolent spirits. "We're not alone here," the man continued, his voice now a haunting whisper that echoed through the night. "This place is cursed. Leave now, or suffer the consequences." Terrified, we scrambled to our tents, trying to find refuge from the malevolent presence that now surrounded us. The sound of scratching and heavy breathing filled the air, the fabric of our tents being torn asunder by unseen forces. Emily screamed as something reached out from the darkness, clawing at her with invisible hands. In the chaos, Mike ran out of the tent, disappearing into the night without a trace. Sarah and Emily followed suit, leaving me alone in the spinning vortex of fear and darkness. The man with the red eyes loomed over me, his grin stretching impossibly wide as he whispered, "You can't escape." I stumbled back to my tent, my heart pounding as I tried to close the flap against the relentless assault of the shadows. The fabric ripped apart under the pressure, and I felt an icy hand grip my shoulder, pulling me into the darkness. I screamed, fighting against the unseen force, but it was no use. The world seemed to tilt, the camp spinning around me as I was dragged into the abyss. When I finally regained consciousness, I was lying in a hospital bed, my body battered and bruised. The sterile white walls of the room were a stark contrast to the cold, dark wilderness where my nightmare had unfolded. Confused and disoriented, I struggled to remember what had happened. The doctor at my bedside explained that I had been found wandering the forest, unconscious and in a state of extreme hypothermia. There was no sign of my friends, no trace of Mike or Emily, just the remnants of our campsite, now buried under a fresh layer of snow. Police searched the area but found nothing, no evidence of what had transpired or where my friends had gone. As I lay there, the memories of that night flooded back, the footprints, the shadowy figure, the chilling whispers. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me from those mountains, something that still watched me from the shadows. Weeks passed, and I struggled to return to my normal life, but the haunting memories lingered. Sometimes, late at night, I'd see something moving in the corner of my eye, a flicker of red in the darkness, a shadow slipping past the edge of my vision. The nightmares were relentless, the screams and whispers echoing through my mind, reminding me that I wasn't truly alone. One evening, I decided to visit the campsite, hoping to find some closure or answers. The snow had stopped, leaving the landscape quiet and serene. As I walked through the familiar clearing, the memories of that night came rushing back, each step heavy with fear and anticipation. I reached the spot where the footprints had led us, now covered under a fresh layer of snow. Kneeling down, I tried to feel for any signs of what we'd encountered, but there was nothing, no trace of the shadowy figure, no evidence of the malevolent presence that had tormented us. As I stood up, a sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it a faint, sorrowful whisper. "Remember us," the voice echoed, a haunting plea that sent chills down my spine. I turned around, scanning the forest, but there was no one there, only the endless expanse of snow-covered trees. But deep down, I knew the truth. The Rockies had claimed my friends, trapping their restless spirits in the frozen wilderness. The man with the red eyes and his twisted grin were a warning to anyone who dared to follow the shadows, a reminder that some secrets are best left undisturbed. Years have passed since that fateful night, and I've tried to move on, to forget the horrors that unfolded in the snowy depths of the Rockies. But the memories remain, a constant reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the supernatural. Sometimes, when the wind howls through the trees and the snow falls silently around me, I catch a glimpse of red eyes in the darkness, watching, waiting, forever bound to the haunted trails of the Rocky Mountains. And so, I continue my journeys, always cautious, always aware that the shadows hold secrets that refuse to stay buried, and that the footprints in the snow are more than just impressions. They are the echoes of souls lost to the darkness, forever wandering the endless, unforgiving wilderness. Story number 2. Snow Shadows. Winter in the White Mountains is a time of breathtaking beauty and relentless isolation. The snow blankets the rugged terrain, turning towering pines and rocky outcrops into ghostly silhouettes against the pale light of the moon. As an avid hiker, I've always been drawn to the solitude and serenity that these mountains offer. But this December trip was unlike any other, destined to etch itself into my memory as a chilling reminder of the thin line between reality and the supernatural. I had planned this solo expedition for months, eager to escape the chaos of city life and find peace amidst nature's embrace. Equipped with my sturdy boots, warm clothing, a reliable map, and enough supplies to last a week, I set out on a crisp Friday morning. The trailhead was easily accessible, marked by an old wooden sign that creaked softly in the winter breeze. The path ahead was well-trodden, a comforting indicator that others had sought solace in these woods before me. The first few days were everything I had hoped for: tranquil hikes, stunning vistas, and the quiet companionship of wildlife. As the week progressed, however, the weather began to shift. Heavy snowstorms rolled in, blanketing the forest in thick layers of white and transforming familiar landmarks into indistinguishable masses of snow. The temperatures plummeted, and the isolation deepened, the only sounds the howling wind and the occasional cracking of ice underfoot. On the 6th day, I decided to push a bit further, eager to explore a remote section of the trail that promised untouched beauty. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the trees and painting the sky with shades of orange and pink that quickly faded into the deep blue of twilight. I reached a clearing where the trees stand, offering a clear view of the moonlit landscape. Setting up my small campsite, I built a fire and settled in for the night, the warmth a welcome respite from the biting cold. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, a sense of unease began to creep over me. The forest, so peaceful during the day, now felt alive with unseen eyes watching from the shadows. I tried to shake off the feeling, reminding myself that it was just the isolation playing tricks on my mind. But then, a distant, low growl echoed through the trees, reverberating off the snow-covered pines and sending chills down my spine. I strained my ears, trying to locate the source of the sound, but it faded as quickly as it had appeared. Probably just a wild animal, I muttered to myself, though doubt gnawed at me. The night grew colder, and the wind picked up, howling through the trees like restless spirits. I pulled my blanket tighter around me and tried to drift off to sleep, but the uneasy feeling lingered. The following morning, the snow had fallen even harder, covering the trail in a thick, white blanket that made progress slow and exhausting. As I trudged through the deep snow, my mind replayed the growl from the night before, the sound haunting my thoughts. Determined to shake off the unease, I pressed on, the trail winding deeper into the heart of the White Mountains. By afternoon, I reached a particularly secluded area, surrounded by dense forests and towering peaks that seemed to touch the sky. The silence here was almost deafening, broken only by the crunch of my boots on the snow and the distant call of a hawk. As the sun began to set once more, casting a silvery glow over the landscape, I decided to set up camp earlier than planned, the thought of another cold night too daunting. That night, as I sat by the fire, sipping hot tea and gazing into the dancing flames, I heard it again, a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very earth beneath me. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened, the sound echoing through the stillness of the night. I glanced around, eyes straining to pierce the darkness, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Deciding that sleep was the best remedy, I tried to calm my racing thoughts and settled into my sleeping bag. But as the hours dragged on, the temperature plummeted further, the cold seeping into my bones despite my layers of clothing. My breath formed visible puffs in the frigid air, and I shivered uncontrollably, the fire's warmth insufficient against the encroaching chill. Just past midnight, a faint, rhythmic scratching noise reached my ears, a sound that seemed to come from the very walls of my tent. I sat up abruptly, heart racing, and peered into the darkness outside. For a moment, everything was still, the snow-covered landscape bathed in the pale light of the moon. But then, a shadowy figure materialized at the edge of the clearing, tall and imposing, its form obscured by the swirling snowflakes. I held my breath, watching in horror as the figure stood motionless, its presence exuding a sense of malevolence that sent chills down my spine. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, as if something, or someone, was trying to claw their way into my sanctuary. Summoning every ounce of courage, I reached for my flashlight and shone it towards the figure, my hands trembling with fear. To my shock, the shadowy form began to change, its outline distorting into a grotesque semblance of a man. His eyes, glowing a sickly yellow, stared directly at me through the tent's thin fabric, filled with an intensity that paralyzed me with fear. His smile stretched impossibly wide, the corners of his mouth curling into a twisted grin that revealed rows of sharp, jagged teeth. "You can't escape," he hissed, his voice a guttural rasp that echoed through the tent. "They're still here." Panic surged through me as I tried to back away, but my limbs felt heavy, as if the very cold was rooting me to the spot. The tent flaps began to tear under the weight of his presence, the fabric ripping apart as the shadowy figure reached inside, his hand cold and clammy as it grasped for me. I screamed, flailing my arms in a desperate attempt to fend him off, but it was futile. The figure's grip tightened, his eyes burning brighter, the darkness around him deepening as he pulled me into the tent's confines. The last thing I saw before everything went black was his twisted smile, his yellow eyes piercing through my soul. When I awoke, I was lying on the cold, hard ground outside my tent, the remnants of my shelter torn apart and scattered around me. My body ached with pain, and my breath came in ragged gasps as I struggled to comprehend what had happened. Glancing around, I saw nothing but the silent, snow-covered forest, the moonlight casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to dance with the whispers of lost souls. Terrified, I stumbled towards the trailhead, my mind racing with questions and fear. How had I escaped? Had the figure truly taken me, or had I somehow survived the encounter? The snow continued to fall, thick and relentless, as I navigated the treacherous path back to civilization, the memory of those glowing yellow eyes and that horrific smile seared into my mind. The next morning, I arrived at a ranger station nestled deep within the White Mountain National Forest. Exhausted and shaken, I recounted my ordeal to the bewildered ranger on duty, who listened with a mixture of concern and skepticism. "We've had reports of strange sightings around here before," he said, trying to reassure me. "But nothing concrete. Maybe you saw something out of the corner of your eye in the dark." But as I inspected my jacket, I noticed the deep scratch marks that marred the fabric, jagged lines that seemed impossibly fresh despite the days that had passed since my trip. My blood ran cold as I realized the true extent of what had happened. I had been marked by something, or someone, that shouldn't exist. Determined to uncover the truth behind my terrifying encounter, I delved into the local legends and folklore surrounding the White Mountains. I discovered stories of cursed trails, restless spirits, and malevolent entities that haunted the snowy wilderness, preying on unsuspecting hikers and isolating travelers in an eternal winter of fear. One legend stood out, the tale of the Snow Walker, a spectral figure said to roam the White Mountains during the harshest winters. Descriptions matched the figure I had encountered, tall, shadowy, with glowing eyes and a sinister smile. It was believed that the Snow Walker was the restless spirit of a hiker who had perished in the mountains, doomed to roam the trails forever, seeking new souls to join him in his eternal torment. Armed with this knowledge, I knew I had to warn others and find a way to appease the restless spirit that had terrorized me. I returned to the ranger station, sharing my findings and urging the authorities to increase patrols and provide better information to hikers about the dangers of the cursed trails. Over the following months, I worked tirelessly to spread awareness about the Snow Walker, sharing my story with anyone who would listen and collaborating with local authorities to develop strategies to protect hikers. Slowly, the incident faded into the annals of local lore, but the memory of that night lingered, a haunting reminder of the darkness that can dwell within even the most beautiful places. Years have passed since my encounter with the Snow Walker, and I've continued to explore the wilds of the White Mountains, always cautious and respectful of the legends that warn of unseen dangers. Sometimes, on particularly cold nights when the snow falls thick and the moonlight casts long shadows through the trees, I catch a glimpse of a tall, shadowy figure in the distance, his yellow eyes watching me as I traverse the silent trails. The experience left an indelible mark on my soul, a constant reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the supernatural. The White Mountains remain a place of awe and wonder, but also of fear and mystery, where the echoes of the past linger in the snow and the shadows hold secrets that refuse to be forgotten. And so, as I continue my journeys through the winter wilderness, I carry with me the lessons learned from that harrowing night, the importance of respecting the legends that warn us of the darkness that can dwell within, and the enduring power of fear that drives us to confront the unknown. The Snow Walker remains a silent guardian of the White Mountains, his presence a chilling reminder that some trails are best left unexplored, their whispers preserved in the silent snow, forever haunting those who dare to listen. Story number 3. Snow Shadows on Crater Lake. Winter in Oregon's Crater Lake is a time of ethereal beauty and piercing isolation. The lake, a deep blue gem nestled within a volcanic caldera, transforms into a vast, frozen expanse each year, its surface a mirror reflecting the towering snow-covered peaks and the endless night sky. I've always been drawn to solitary places where the silence speaks louder than words and the cold seeps into your very bones. That December, I sought refuge from the chaos of city life, embarking on a winter hiking trip with my partner, Laura. We arrived at Crater Lake in early December, the road slick with recent snowfalls and the air thick with the promise of a harsh winter. Our campsite was a secluded spot near the shore, where the ice formed intricate patterns on the water's surface, shimmering under the pale light of the moon. Setting up our tent and gathering firewood, we settled in for the night, the warmth of the flames a comforting barrier against the biting cold. As midnight approached, the world outside our tent grew still, the only sounds the gentle crackling of the fire and the distant howl of a lone wolf. Laura and I shared stories and memories, our voices a soft murmur in the vastness of the frozen landscape. The serenity was both peaceful and unnerving, a reminder of how small we were in the face of nature's grandeur. Around 1 a.m., a sudden gust of wind whipped through the trees, sending snowflakes swirling like tiny specters in the darkness. Laura shivered, pulling her blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her eyes scanning the shadows beyond the tent. I strained to listen, but all I could hear was the wind's mournful cry. "Probably just the wind," I replied, though unease gnawed at me. Minutes later, a distant, low growl echoed through the night, reverberating off the icy walls of the caldera. My heart skipped a beat as I exchanged a worried glance with Laura. "Maybe it's a wild animal," I suggested, though doubt clouded my voice. Before we could decide on a course of action, Laura pointed toward the frozen lake. Through the tent's flap, I saw a dark silhouette standing in the middle of the ice, motionless and imposing against the vast whiteness. My breath caught in my throat as I realized it was a figure, a large, black shape that seemed out of place in the serene winter landscape. "Should we check it out?" Laura asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, the rational part of my mind urging caution while my curiosity pulled me forward. "Let's get a closer look," I decided, grabbing my flashlight and stepping out into the frigid night air. The cold bit at my skin, making every step a struggle against the oppressive chill. As we approached the lake, the crunch of our boots on the ice was unnervingly loud in the stillness. The figure remained stationary, its presence both haunting and inexplicable. Laura and I drew closer, the shadows dancing around us as the flashlight's beam flickered in the wintry darkness. Then, the figure began to move. A sharp, rhythmic scraping sound cut through the silence, like ice cracking under immense pressure. The figure shifted, its movements slow and deliberate, each step creating cracks that splintered the frozen surface. My heart pounded in my chest as we watched in horror, transfixed by the unnatural spectacle. Suddenly, the figure turned, and in the beam of my flashlight, I saw its face, or what I thought was its face. It wasn't human. Its features twisted into a grotesque mask, sharp, jagged teeth protruding from a wide, unnatural grin, and eyes that burned a deep, unsettling red, glowing fiercely against the dark expanse of the ice. Laura screamed, a blood-curdling sound that echoed across the lake. The figure lunged toward us with terrifying speed, its form blurring as it moved. I turned to run, but my legs felt heavy, as if the very cold was holding me in place. The ice beneath my feet began to crack and break, the sound deafening as it splintered under the weight of something unseen. In a desperate bid for survival, I grabbed Laura's hand and pulled her back, but the figure was relentless. It swiped at us with clawed hands, the force of its strike sending shards of ice flying into the air. The freezing wind whipped around us, and the temperature inside the tent seemed to drop even further, our breaths visible in the frigid air. "Run!" I shouted, breaking free from Laura's grip and sprinting towards the forest's edge. The figure followed, its red eyes burning with an otherworldly rage, its growls growing louder and more menacing with each passing moment. We stumbled through the snow, the trees looming overhead like silent guardians of the night. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every rustle a potential danger. The figure's presence was suffocating, a dark force that refused to let us escape. Just as exhaustion threatened to overtake me, I saw the faint outline of our truck through the trees. Summoning the last of my strength, I pushed forward, dragging Laura behind me. The figure was close, its claws scraping against the snow as it closed in on us. My heart raced as I fumbled with the keys, desperately trying to unlock the door. With a final, frantic effort, the engine roared to life, and we sped away, the truck's headlights piercing through the night. The figure followed, its red eyes gleaming in the rearview mirror, its screams echoing through the cold air. The ice beneath us continued to crack and break, the sound a constant reminder of the peril we were in. We didn't stop until we reached the ranger station, the safety of the warm building a beacon in the desolate wilderness. Gasping for breath, we collapsed inside, the nightmare momentarily over. The ranger looked at us with concern, helping us settle into chairs by the fire. "What happened out there?" he asked, his eyes filled with worry. I recounted the terrifying encounter, my voice shaking with fear. The ranger listened intently, nodding as he absorbed the details. "You're lucky to be alive," he said softly. Crater Lake is known for its strange occurrences, especially during the winter months. There are legends of spirits and creatures that haunt the frozen lake, drawn to the living and seeking to drag them into the darkness. Laura shivered, her eyes wide with fear. "We saw something not human. It attacked us." The ranger sighed, rubbing his temples. "There have been reports over the years, but we never caught anything concrete. The lake has a way of keeping its secrets, and it's best to respect its boundaries." As the night wore on, the ranger's words echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder of the thin line between the natural and the supernatural. We spent the rest of our time at the station in uneasy silence, the warmth of the fire unable to dispel the lingering fears that had taken root in our hearts. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the snow-covered landscape. We packed up our gear, the memory of the previous night still fresh in our minds. As we prepared to leave, the ranger handed us a map, highlighting the trails and warning us of the dangers that lay within the frozen expanse of Crater Lake. "Be careful out there," he advised. "And remember, some places are best left undisturbed." We nodded, gratitude and relief washing over us as we drove away from the ranger station. The road ahead was long and treacherous, but the memory of that night served as a constant reminder of the mysteries that lie hidden beneath the ice and snow. Crater Lake, with its frozen beauty and dark legends, had tested us in ways we could never have imagined. Years have passed since that harrowing night, and I've continued to explore the wilds of America, each journey a testament to survival and the enduring power of fear. But the memory of Crater Lake remains a shadow in my mind, a chilling reminder of the night we encountered the Snow Woman, an entity born from the legends and fueled by the restless spirits of the frozen lake. Sometimes, when the winter winds howl and the snow falls thick and relentless, I catch a glimpse of something in the distance, a shadowy figure standing on the ice, its red eyes glowing ominously in the moonlight. I press harder on the accelerator, my heart pounding as the echoes of that night linger in my thoughts, forever etched into my memory. Crater Lake stands as a monument to the unknown, its frozen surface a barrier between the living and the spirits that haunt its depths. The footprints and bloodstains left behind are silent testaments to the encounter, a warning to those who dare to tread too close to the mysteries that lie beneath the snow. And so, as I continue my journeys through the vast wilderness, I carry with me the lessons learned from that night, the importance of respecting the legends that warn us of the darkness that can dwell within, and the enduring power of fear that drives us to confront the unknown. Crater Lake remains a place of beauty and terror, a frozen mirror reflecting the secrets of the past and the shadows that linger in the silent depths of the winter night. Story number 4. The Snow Beast of Forgotten Cabin. Winter in Alaska is a harsh mistress, unforgiving in her solitude and relentless in her chill. As an avid mountaineer, I've always been drawn to the untouched wilderness, seeking solace in the silence that only nature can provide. But this trip was different. The invitation to explore the depths of the Alaskan forest had come from an old friend, Mike, whose disappearance years ago had become the stuff of local legend. Determined to uncover the truth behind his vanishing, I embarked on this solitary journey, unaware of the horrors that awaited me. It was mid-December when I arrived at the edge of the White Horse Forest, the snow piling high around me, muffling the sounds of the world. The air was biting cold, each breath a visible puff of mist that hung briefly before dissipating into the frosty night. Armed with my gear, a sturdy tent, warm clothing, a reliable map, and enough supplies to last a week, I set off into the dense woods, the promise of adventure driving me forward despite the encroaching darkness. The forest was a labyrinth of towering pines and jagged rocks, the snow-covered ground crunching under my boots with each step. The sun had long set, leaving behind a canopy of stars that twinkled faintly through the thick branches. As night deepened, the temperature plummeted, and the wind began to howl through the trees, carrying with it an eerie sense of foreboding. After hours of trekking, I stumbled upon an old cabin nestled between two massive boulders. It was a relic from a bygone era, its wooden structure withered and worn, blending seamlessly with the surrounding wilderness. The windows were frosted over, and the door hung slightly ajar, creaking softly in the wind. Despite the dilapidated state, there was a certain allure to the place, a silent invitation to seek refuge from the impending storm. Deciding that the cabin was the perfect spot to spend the night, I approached cautiously, the snow swirling around me in a relentless dance. Pushing the door open, I was greeted by a musty odor of decay and the faint scent of pine. Inside, the cabin was sparsely furnished, the remnants of past occupants scattered haphazardly around the room. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, long extinguished but still exuding a sense of warmth that belied the current chill. I set up my tent in a corner, securing it firmly against the elements, and built a small fire in the fireplace using the remnants of old logs and dry tinder. As the flames flickered to life, casting dancing shadows across the room, I felt a temporary sense of comfort. The storm outside intensified, the wind howling like a chorus of lost souls, and the snow continued to fall in thick, relentless sheets. Hours passed in uneasy silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the storm's fury outside. My mind wandered to memories of Mike, recalling the last time we had spoken about exploring these remote areas. His disappearance had been sudden and mysterious, with no clues left behind. The locals whispered tales of strange creatures and supernatural forces that haunted these woods, but I had always dismissed them as mere folklore until now. Around midnight, a deep, heavy noise resonated from above, shaking the very foundation of the cabin. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to listen, the sound growing louder and more distinct. It was a combination of thudding and scraping, as if something, or someone, was moving across the roof. I grabbed my flashlight, the beam piercing the darkness as I cautiously made my way toward the source of the noise. Climbing the creaky wooden stairs that led to the attic, I felt a growing sense of unease. The attic was cramped and cluttered, filled with old furniture covered in dust and cobwebs. As I reached the top, the noises ceased abruptly, leaving an oppressive silence in their wake. I shone my flashlight around, the beam revealing nothing but the empty space and forgotten relics of the past. Just as I was about to descend, a sudden, guttural growl echoed through the attic, freezing me in my tracks. My blood ran cold as I turned to face the source of the sound, my flashlight flickering wildly. There, emerging from the shadows, was a massive creature covered in thick, white fur. Its eyes glowed a menacing yellow, and its mouth was filled with sharp, jagged teeth that seemed to glisten in the dim light. Panic surged through me as the creature advanced, its heavy footsteps sending tremors through the attic floor. I fumbled for my gun, the cold metal biting into my palm, but before I could raise it, the creature lunged forward, claws extended and growling with primal fury. I fired a shot, the sound echoing through the cabin, but the bullet seemed to have no effect, passing through the creature as if it were made of smoke. Desperate to escape, I turned and sprinted down the stairs, the creature's growls growing louder behind me. I reached the living room, barricading the door with whatever furniture I could find, but the creature was relentless, pounding against the barriers with increasing ferocity. The fire flickered wildly, casting grotesque shadows that seemed to dance and move with a life of their own. In a last-ditch effort, I grabbed a heavy log from the fireplace and swung it at the creature, the impact sending it reeling back momentarily. But the respite was short-lived, as the creature regained its composure and continued its assault, its eyes burning with an unholy light. I could feel the cabin trembling around me, the structure groaning under the creature's relentless force. Just when all hope seemed lost, the storm outside began to abate, the wind dying down and the snow ceasing its relentless assault. The creature paused, its attention shifting from the cabin to the window where the first rays of dawn began to break through the darkness. With a final, defiant growl, it retreated into the shadows, its form dissipating into the morning mist as silently as it had appeared. Exhausted and shaken, I collapsed onto the cold wooden floor, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The cabin was eerily quiet, the only signs of the night's horrors the deep scratch marks on the walls and the bloodstains that marred the once pristine surfaces. Determined to find answers, I scoured the cabin for any clues, my mind racing with questions about the creature and the fate of my friend Mike. In the dead of morning, I ventured outside to assess the damage. The snow-covered landscape was pristine, the storm's wrath having left behind a blanket of silence. But as I approached the remnants of the cabin, I noticed something horrifying: large, deep footprints embedded in the snow, leading away from the cabin and disappearing into the forest. They were unlike any animal tracks I had ever seen, massive and distorted, with claw marks that suggested a creature beyond human comprehension. As I followed the trail, the forest seemed to come alive with an oppressive presence, the trees whispering secrets that only the cold wind could hear. The footprints led me deeper into the woods, past frozen streams and towering pines that loomed like silent sentinels. My heart raced as I stumbled upon a clearing, the snow untouched except for the footprints that ended abruptly in the center. Standing there was the same creature from the cabin, its eyes still glowing with that menacing yellow light. This time, it stood motionless, as if waiting for me. I raised my gun once more, but before I could react, the creature let out a deafening roar that echoed through the forest, the sound vibrating through my very soul. I turned to flee, but the forest seemed to close in around me, the path behind me vanishing into the depths of the woods. The creature advanced with terrifying speed, its presence overwhelming and suffocating. I ran blindly through the snow, the cold piercing my skin and my lungs burning with each breath. The sound of my own heartbeat was the only thing that kept me moving forward, the fear propelling me deeper into the unknown. Hours seemed to pass as I navigated the treacherous terrain, the forest becoming a maze of shadows and whispers. Just when I thought I could run no longer, I stumbled upon a hidden trail that led to a distant outpost, a small, abandoned ranger station that offered the promise of safety and answers. Collapsing at the doorstep, I pounded on the door, desperate for help. To my relief, the door creaked open, revealing an old, withered ranger who looked at me with a mixture of concern and skepticism. "What happened out here?" he asked, his eyes narrowing as he took in my disheveled appearance and the bloodstains that marred my clothing. I recounted the night's terrifying events, the ranger listening intently as I described the creature and the mysterious footprints. He sighed, shaking his head. "You're lucky to be alive," he said softly. "Crater Lake has a dark history, especially during the winter months. There are legends of spirits and creatures that haunt these woods, remnants of those who never made it out." As I sat by the dwindling fire in the ranger's outpost, I couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was still out there, watching and waiting. The ranger provided me with warm blankets and a hot meal, but the memory of the night's horrors lingered, a constant shadow in the back of my mind. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a serene but deceptive calm. The ranger offered to escort me back to civilization, but I declined, choosing instead to spend another night at the outpost to gather my strength and contemplate the mysteries that lay beneath the snow-covered wilderness. Days turned into weeks as I pieced together the fragments of Mike's disappearance and the legends that surrounded Crater Lake. It became clear that the cabin was more than just an abandoned shelter. It was a gateway, a place where the boundary between the living and the dead was thin, allowing restless spirits and otherworldly creatures to cross into our world. Determined to put an end to the cycle of terror, I returned to the cabin with the ranger's guidance, armed with knowledge and tools to confront the darkness that dwelled within. The journey back was fraught with challenges, the forest more hostile and unwelcoming than before. But the fire inside me burned brighter, fueled by the need to uncover the truth and honor the memory of my lost friend. Standing once again before the cabin, I felt the weight of the legends and the spirits that lingered in the cold Alaskan night. With a deep breath, I entered the cabin, the door creaking open as I stepped into the familiar yet foreboding space. The remnants of the past were all around me, the bloodstains and scratch marks serving as silent witnesses to the horrors that had unfolded within these walls. As I approached the fireplace, the air grew thick with an oppressive presence, the shadows deepening as if the very darkness was alive. I lit a candle, its flickering flame casting eerie patterns on the walls, and began to chant words of remembrance and closure, hoping to appease the restless spirits that haunted this forsaken place. Suddenly, the temperature dropped once more, the cold seeping into my bones as the figure of the snow beast materialized before me, its eyes burning with an intense, otherworldly light. But this time, I was prepared. I stood my ground, holding the candle aloft, my voice steady as I continued the chant. "We remember you," I called out, my voice echoing through the cabin. "May you find peace." The creature hesitated, its red eyes flickering with a hint of sorrow. Slowly, it began to dissipate, its form melting into the shadows as the oppressive energy lifted. The cabin grew silent, the darkness receding as dawn broke over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the snow-covered landscape. Exhausted but triumphant, I knew that the cycle of terror had been broken, the spirits finally finding the peace they had long been denied. As I left the cabin, the footprints in the snow began to fade, their purpose fulfilled as the forest reclaimed its silence. Years later, I still visit the White Horse Forest, the memory of that night etched into my soul. Crater Lake remains a place of haunting beauty, its frozen surface a reminder of the mysteries that lie beneath. The legends of the snow beast and the restless spirits continue to circulate, a testament to the thin veil that separates our world from the supernatural. And so, I drive along Highway 101, the snowflakes dancing in the light of the morning sun, always aware that the shadows hold secrets waiting to be uncovered. The snow beast of the abandoned cabin remains a silent guardian of the wilderness, a chilling reminder that some places are best left undisturbed, their whispers preserved in the silent embrace of the Alaskan winter. Story number 5. Snow Shadows of Deadwood. I've always been fascinated by abandoned places, their silent stories etched into the decaying structures and forgotten landscapes. So when a group of friends and I decided to explore Deadwood, Wyoming, a town swallowed by relentless winter snows and now a cold, dead land, I was eager for the adventure. The stories about Deadwood were chilling, tales of avalanches, disappearances, and eerie shadows that haunted the snowy ruins. Armed with cameras and a sense of curiosity, we set out to capture the ghostly beauty of the place. The journey to Deadwood was grueling. The roads were treacherously icy, and the snow seemed to fall in relentless sheets, obscuring our path. Finally, after hours of driving, the silhouette of Deadwood emerged through the blizzard, its structures barely visible against the blinding white landscape. As we approached, the air grew colder, the silence around us palpable and oppressive. Our first stop was the old Main Street, where boarded-up storefronts and collapsed buildings stood as silent witnesses to the town's demise. The snow was deep, and large footprints crisscrossed the ground, leading us towards an old house at the end of the street. The footprints were enormous, far too large to belong to any human, each step leaving an imprint that seemed to ripple into the snow beneath. Intrigued, we followed the trail to the house, our footsteps crunching loudly in the stillness. The house was a grand, yet decaying structure, its windows shattered and doors hanging off their hinges. Inside, the furnishings were frozen in time, covered in thick layers of ice that glimmered in the weak daylight filtering through the broken windows. It was as if the house had been abandoned overnight, the ice preserving every detail in a macabre display. We decided to set up our camp inside, seeking shelter from the impending storm. As the evening approached, the temperature plummeted, and the snow began to fall more heavily, blanketing the town in a thick layer of white. We huddled around the fireplace, the warmth a welcome respite from the biting cold that seeped into the very walls of the house. Night fell swiftly, the sky darkening to a deep, inky black, pierced only by the occasional flash of lightning illuminating the snow-covered landscape. As we sat around the fire, the silence was broken by a distant, guttural growl that echoed through the night. At first, we dismissed it as a wild animal, perhaps a wolf, but the growl was too deep, too menacing to be that of any known creature. Curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to investigate the source of the sound. Armed with our flashlights, we ventured outside, the snow crunching under our boots. The footprints we had followed earlier were now leading us deeper into the forest that bordered Deadwood, the trees looming ominously against the night sky. The growling grew louder, a rhythmic, throaty rumble that resonated through the cold air. We stopped in a clearing, the snow swirling around us in a relentless dance, making it difficult to see. That's when we saw it, a massive, shadowy figure standing in the middle of the clearing, its form indistinct against the swirling snow. The creature was tall, its body covered in thick, white fur that seemed to blend seamlessly with the snow. Its eyes glowed a fierce, unnatural yellow, piercing through the darkness and fixated on us with a predatory intensity. Without warning, the creature lunged forward, its movement swift and terrifyingly agile. We stumbled back, tripping over the snow, as it let out a bone-chilling roar that echoed through the forest. One of our group, Mark, froze in fear, unable to move as the creature approached him. Suddenly, the snow beneath his feet gave way, and he was plunged into the icy depths below, disappearing from sight with a scream that was cut short by silence. Terrified, we tried to run, but the forest seemed to close in around us, the snow turning into a blinding whirlwind that obscured our path. Panic set in as we realized we were disoriented, every direction leading us back to the clearing where the creature had attacked Mark. It was as if something was toying with us, manipulating the snow to trap us in this endless, frozen nightmare. Desperate to find our way back to the house, we stumbled through the snow, the growling now accompanied by the sound of heavy breathing and the occasional snapping of twigs underfoot. As we neared the house, the growling ceased abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed down on us like a physical weight. We huddled together, the fear palpable as we tried to make sense of what was happening. Suddenly, a loud cracking noise echoed through the air, followed by a sharp, metallic scrape against the window of the house. We turned to look, and there, silhouetted against the moonlight, was a massive arm covered in thick, white fur, reaching out through the shattered window. The creature's red eyes bore into us, and its mouth curled into a grotesque grin, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth that glimmered menacingly in the weak light. Laura, our most level-headed member, mustered the courage to confront the creature. "What do you want from us?" she demanded, her voice shaking but steady. The creature didn't respond with words. Instead, it let out a guttural growl and began to pound on the window, the force of its blows causing shards of glass to rain down like deadly ice. In a split second, a massive, hairy arm burst through the window, clawing at Laura with inhuman strength. She screamed as the creature dragged her out into the snow, her figure disappearing into the blizzard as it pulled her away from the safety of the house. The remaining members of our group could only watch in horror, our own safety slipping away as the creature continued its assault. We tried to fight back, but our weapons were no match for its brute strength and supernatural speed. One by one, we were overwhelmed, dragged away into the darkness with the creature's relentless pursuit. When the storm finally abated, I found myself alone, the snow-covered town of Deadwood eerily quiet. My body ached with exhaustion and fear, my mind struggling to piece together the events of the night. I stumbled back to the house, the once inviting shelter now a monument to the horrors that had unfolded within its walls. The snow was still deep, covering everything in a blanket of white, erasing any trace of our presence. But as I approached, I noticed something chilling, the footprints leading away from the house, now stained with blood and trailing into the surrounding forest. They were enormous, too large to belong to any known animal, and they led directly into the heart of the woods, where the shadows seemed to move and dance with a life of their own. Determined to survive, I began to follow the bloody trail, my heart pounding in my chest as I navigated the treacherous snow. The forest around me was alive with the sounds of the night, the howling wind and distant cries of unseen creatures filling the air. Every step felt heavy, as if the snow was trying to hold me back, forcing me to confront the darkness that had claimed my friends. As I ventured deeper into the forest, the moonlight began to fade, replaced by an impenetrable darkness that swallowed the snow-covered landscape. The growling that had echoed through the night now seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a constant reminder of the creature's presence. My flashlight flickered, the beam barely cutting through the blackness as I pressed on, driven by a desperate need to survive. Suddenly, I stumbled upon a clearing, the ground uneven and treacherous beneath my feet. In the center stood the same creature from the cabin, its red eyes burning with a fierce intensity that seemed to pierce through my very soul. But this time, it wasn't alone. Surrounding it were the spirits of those who had lost their lives in Deadwood, their ghostly forms trapped in an eternal cycle of torment and fear. The creature let out a deafening roar, the sound echoing through the clearing as the spirits began to chant, their voices merging into a haunting melody that filled the air with an oppressive weight. I felt the temperature drop even further, the cold now a living presence that pressed against my skin, making it difficult to breathe. The spirits reached out, their translucent hands trying to drag me into the darkness, but I fought back, refusing to succumb to the nightmare that threatened to consume me. Summoning every ounce of strength, I stood my ground, facing the creature and the spirits that surrounded me. "Leave us alone!" I shouted, my voice breaking the eerie silence as the spirits recoiled, their forms flickering and fading. The creature hesitated, its red eyes flickering with uncertainty, before turning and disappearing into the darkness, the spirits following closely behind. Breathing heavily, I realized that the cycle had been broken, for now. The spirits and the creature had retreated, leaving the clearing silent once more. But the memory of that night would forever haunt me, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lie hidden in the shadows of abandoned places and the restless spirits that seek to reclaim what was lost. As dawn broke over Deadwood, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the darkness, casting a warm glow on the snow-covered landscape. I made my way back to civilization, the snow crunching under my feet and the distant calls of birds a stark contrast to the horrors of the night. The footprints and bloodstains that had marked our presence were now just memories, fading into the pristine white as the town of Deadwood remained a silent witness to the darkness that had claimed it. But sometimes, when the winter winds howl through the abandoned streets and the snow falls heavy and relentless, I catch a glimpse of glowing red eyes in the distance, watching, waiting, forever bound to the frozen ruins of Deadwood. And I know that some places are best left undisturbed, their whispers preserved in the silent snow, forever haunting those who dare to uncover their hidden secrets. Story number 6. Teeth in the Snow Shadows. Winter in Vermont is both beautiful and brutal. The snow blankets the landscape in a pristine white, turning familiar trails into treacherous paths and transforming towering pines into ghostly silhouettes against the pale sky. As a seasoned hunter, I've always found solace in these frozen woods, where the silence is broken only by the crunch of snow underfoot and the distant call of a lone owl. But this year, something felt different, an unshakable unease that clung to the air like the biting cold. I had been tracking deer for weeks, setting traps and following tracks through the deep snow. The mountain I called home was a reliable source of game, but lately, I couldn't ignore the rumors swirling through the local hunting community. Whispers of a snow monster that roamed the mountain, leaving behind oversized footprints and vanishing without a trace. Most dismissed it as mere folklore, stories spun to keep hunters cautious and respectful of the wilderness. But as the days grew shorter and the nights colder, my skepticism began to waver. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to twinkle in the twilight sky, I decided to make one last trek to check my traps before the worst of the winter set in. The forest was serene, the snow reflecting the fading light and casting long, eerie shadows between the trees. I moved cautiously, aware of every sound and every movement, my rifle slung over my shoulder and my eye scanning the surroundings for any signs of movement. As night fell, the temperature plummeted, and the wind began to howl through the trees, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. I reached my campsite, a small clearing surrounded by dense woods, and began to set up my tent. The fire crackled to life, providing a much-needed warmth against the icy air. I settled down, pulling my blanket tighter around me and gazing into the dancing flames, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over me. Around midnight, the tranquility was shattered by a distant, heavy thud, followed by a series of scraping sounds that echoed through the forest. My heart raced as I sat up, straining to hear over the storm's fury. The sounds grew louder, more distinct, deep, guttural growls and the unmistakable noise of something moving across the snow-covered ground. I grabbed my flashlight and cautiously approached the tent's entrance, the beam cutting through the darkness and illuminating the surrounding trees. There, leading straight to my campsite, were large footprints etched into the snow. They were unlike any animal tracks I had ever seen, massive, with deep claw marks and an irregular shape that suggested something far more sinister than a bear or a wolf. My mind raced, recalling the stories of the snow monster. Could it be real? Was I about to face the legend that had haunted the local hunters for generations? I hesitated, torn between fear and the need to confirm the truth. Gathering my courage, I decided to follow the trail, stepping out into the freezing night with my rifle at the ready. The footprints led me deeper into the forest, the snow crunching under my boots as I pushed through the dense underbrush. The growling sounds intensified, reverberating through the trees and sending chills down my spine. My flashlight flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows that danced and shifted with each step I took. After what felt like an eternity, the trail ended abruptly at the edge of a frozen pond, the ice shimmering under the pale light of the moon. In the center of the pond stood a massive, shadowy figure, its form barely discernible against the snowy backdrop. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the truth of the rumors. The snow monster was real, and it was right before me. I took a step forward, the weight of my fear pressing down on me. The creature remained still, its presence exuding a palpable sense of malevolence. Then, without warning, it began to move, lumbering towards me with a terrifying grace. The ground seemed to shake with each step it took, the snow spraying around its enormous feet. I raised my rifle, my hands trembling as I tried to steady my aim. The creature let out a guttural growl, its mouth opening to reveal rows of sharp, jagged teeth that gleamed menacingly in the moonlight. Its eyes burned a fierce red, glowing with an otherworldly intensity that seemed to pierce through the darkness and into my very soul. "Stay back," I warned, my voice shaking despite my efforts to remain calm. The creature paused, its red eyes narrowing as it stared at me. For a moment, there was silence, the only sound the howling wind and the distant crackle of my campfire. Then, with a sudden burst of speed that belied its massive size, the monster charged at me, its growls turning into blood-curdling screams that echoed through the frozen landscape. I fired, the gunshot breaking the silence as the bullet struck the creature. To my horror, it seemed to have no effect. The creature merely staggered, its form flickering like a candle flame in the wind. Before I could react, it vanished, disappearing into the night as abruptly as it had appeared. Shaken and terrified, I stood there for a moment, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. The footprints remained, leading back towards my tent, but the creature was gone, leaving behind an oppressive silence that felt almost unnatural. The next morning, I awoke to a world transformed by the night's events. The sun had risen, casting a pale light over the snowy landscape, but the memory of the creature haunted me still. I inspected my campsite, finding my tent intact but covered in thick layers of ice and snow. My rifle was still by my side, but the only sign of the creature's presence was the large, deep scratch marks etched into the tent's fabric and the bloodstains that marred the pristine snow. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to delve deeper into the local legends and history of Dead Mountain. The stories spoke of a creature born from the harsh winters and the relentless isolation, a guardian of the mountain that punished those who dared to trespass into its domain. Many dismissed it as mere folklore, but the evidence of my encounter left me questioning everything I thought I knew about the wilderness. Over the following weeks, I returned to Dead Mountain, driven by a need to understand the creature that had attacked me. Each time I ventured into the forest, I felt the creature's presence lurking in the shadows, watching and waiting. The scratches on my tent became more frequent, growing deeper and more sinister, as if the monster was leaving a warning, a mark of its wrath and a reminder of its dominion over the mountain. One evening, as the sun began to set and the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, I made my way back to my campsite, only to find the ground beneath my feet covered in fresh, large footprints leading away from the tent and into the depths of the forest. My heart pounded as I realized the creature was not done with me yet. Determined to confront it and end the nightmare, I followed the trail, my flashlight cutting through the growing darkness. The footprints led me to a secluded area deep within the forest, where the trees grew thick and the snow lay undisturbed. In the center of a clearing stood the creature once more, its red eyes burning with an intensity that mirrored my own fear and determination. This time, however, I was prepared. Armed with my rifle and a newfound resolve, I faced the creature, ready to defend myself against the legend that had come to life. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the terror that gripped me. The creature let out a low, mournful growl, its eyes never leaving mine. In a moment of clarity, I saw a flicker of something more in its gaze, a hint of sorrow, perhaps a plea for understanding. I lowered my rifle slightly, my curiosity piqued by the unexpected emotion in its eyes. "Is there something you want?" I asked, taking a cautious step forward. The creature paused, its red eyes softening for a brief moment before it turned and slowly backed away, its form fading into the shadows as it disappeared into the night. I watched, a mixture of relief and confusion washing over me, as the creature vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the silent snow and the lingering echoes of its presence. In the days that followed, I continued my research, uncovering stories of hunters and explorers who had encountered the snow monster over the years. Each tail was marked by the same signs, a series of large, deep footprints, unexplained disappearances, and the chilling presence of a creature with glowing red eyes and razor-sharp teeth. It became clear that the creature was more than just a guardian. It was a spirit bound to the mountain, a protector of the wilderness that sought to maintain the balance between man and nature. Determined to honor the creature's role and find a way to coexist peacefully, I returned to Dead Mountain one final time. Armed with knowledge and respect for the legends, I set out to leave offerings of food and warmth, hoping to appease the spirit and end the cycle of fear that had plagued the mountain for generations. As night fell once more, I sat by the fire, the offerings laid out before me. The snow fell gently, covering the ground in a serene blanket of white. I waited in silence, the chill of the night pressing against my skin and the wind whispering through the trees with a sense of anticipation. Suddenly, the air grew heavy, and the temperature dropped, the cold seeping into my bones. The footprints reappeared, leading towards my tent, and my heart raced as I saw the shadowy figure emerge from the darkness. But this time, there was no aggression, only a haunting sadness in its red eyes. "I understand," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the howling wind. The creature paused, its gaze meeting mine with an intensity that spoke volumes. For a moment, there was a connection, an understanding between man and spirit, bound by the harshness of winter and the untamed wilderness. Slowly, the creature bowed its head, a gesture of acceptance and peace, before fading into the night, leaving behind only the silent snow and a sense of harmony restored. As I walked away from Dead Mountain, the snow began to fall once more, the night sky illuminated by the soft glow of the moon. The footprints remained, but now they were peaceful, leading away from the campsite and into the embrace of the wilderness. The legend of the snow monster had been laid to rest, its role as guardian fulfilled by understanding and respect. Years have passed since that fateful winter, and I've continued my adventures through the wilderness, each journey a testament to survival and the enduring power of nature's mysteries. But the memory of Dead Mountain and the creature with the red eyes remains a constant shadow in my mind. A reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown and the importance of respecting the legends that warn us of the darkness that can dwell within. Sometimes, when the snow falls heavy and the wind whispers through the trees, I catch a glimpse of glowing red eyes in the distance, watching, waiting, forever bound to the silent snow and the haunted trails of Vermont's wilderness. And I know that some legends are more than just stories, they are guardians of the wild, their presence a reminder of the balance between man and nature, and the enduring mysteries that lie hidden beneath the snow-covered landscape.